Good morning. We're at SLUH High this morning, Thursday, May the 29th, 2025, continuing the Oral History Project, which is a component of the SLUH High Archives Project. And today we're having Joan Bugnitz, the longtime student arts director here at SLUH High, who is now retiring after 34 years. Welcome, Joan, and thank you for joining us this morning. Let's start at the beginning. When did you start at SLUH High? What year?
I started in 1991.
And who hired you? Who was the...
Paul Owens.
Paul was the principal at the time?
He was the first lay principal, yes. He had been principal for quite a few years when I came.
So Paul hired you. What was the state of the department when you came in 1991? I mean, I know Father Willie Doyle started fine arts back in the 70s, early 70s, I believe. Mm-hmm. Had it evolved over 60s. The 20 years?
You know, at that point, when I was hired, there were only, and when I talk about fine arts, it's theater and the performing arts and dance and choral music. When I started, there were only 3 full-time people in the entire department.
3 in the whole department?
1 in each, yeah. There was Joe Schulte in theater.
Yes.
John Melock in music, and John Miller in...
John was
in studio arts.
Uh-huh.
And there were, everybody else, including me, were part-time. Mary Whalen.
Oh, you were hired part-time initially?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
How long did that go on?
It went on for 3 years. I took the place of Father Phil Steele, who was going into pastoral. He taught, well, he wasn't full-time because I took over his position. So he was the other part-time art instructor with John, and he was moving into campus ministry. So they hired me. I had been at prep seminary for 9 years and
teaching fine arts, or
yeah.
Uh-huh.
And out of nowhere, the Archbishop pulled the plug on the school, and so I just took the part-time job. We found out in February, so
yes.
We didn't have much time. So I started here part-time. But yeah, there was Joe Kessner was in music, but he was part-time. Mark Cummings was an English teacher who taught film part-time. So it was mostly, there were more part-time people than full-time people in the department at the time.
And you were specifically hired to teach studio arts, visual arts?
Yeah,
what was your concentration,
I was teaching
please?
painting and drawing.
Painting and drawing? Mm-hmm. Were the students receptive? I mean, did you have a good contact? Or one of the things I wanted to explore is, was this all elective, or were the students required? What was the requirement for fine arts in the early years?
It was the state's requirement, which is just 1 unit, 2 semesters.
2 semesters were required?
That's all, yes. And that stayed until last year. Yeah, and it was also, it could be taken, you had classes of all 4 grade levels sometimes. So it was just, whenever someone could fit it in their schedule. It wasn't there wasn't quite a progression to the courses people took. I was kind of taken aback when I came from prep to here. I felt it was, I guess there just wasn't a sequence of courses and a beginning and end that I saw, We didn't really have an art show at the end of the year. Because it was just one guy doing everything,
Was there limited understanding or support from administration as to how the fine arts department should be not expanded but supported better?
I didn't feel that when I came here. It was kind of
so it evolved over later years.
It did, yeah. Yeah.
And what about, you said, so it was required 2 semesters of some degree of fine arts participation in one of the programs.
Right.
Would you go over again for us? The fine arts department consisted of theater?
Theater, which is improv.
Yes.
Performing arts, I'll say.
Yeah.
Improv, dance, choral music, instrumental music. Improv wasn't going on, I take that back, but that's what it is now. We did not have improv, just had theater courses, film courses, choral music, instrumental music, and the studio arts, which are,
So it was kind of a diverse group. I mean, in terms,
Yeah,
and it was the department. Was there a person who was in charge of the department? I mean, over all these different separate.
Yes and no. There was a department chair, Joe Schulte, and he'd been
Joe.
that forever.
Yes.
And but it's not unlike now. Each department kind of, somewhat independent of one another. Probably what pulled us together in those early days was just the fact that we were kind of vying for that one unit of fine arts, and so we all communicated a lot with, if we were offering a course, if we were changing and it affected another department. But in those days, we were spread out, in different offices, and yeah.
Well, that
and
was
so
one
many
of
of
the
us were
things I was
part-time,
curious
too.
about, because I know there's competition, so to speak, between the different departments. So I mean, what I'm getting at is fine arts, like I guess each department kind of had a fight for attention, support of all kinds, financial, space allocation, those kind of
Yeah,
things.
here within our own group, I think we've always been real respectful of what one department does, how it affects another department, and even more so now. Because there's more of us full time. When you're part time, you're not even obligated to come to department meetings. It's just you have another job somewhere maybe, or interest somewhere, and so it wasn't the cohesive group it is now. I mean,
Now,
I think
can
there's
the students take? I mean, they're still required to take 2 semesters.
4.
Oh, they're also required now 4
we changed
semesters.
that last year.
So that's a recent change.
It's just affecting.
Can a student who has real interest and shows ability in something take electives? I mean, more than 4 semesters?
Oh, sure. It usually involves some 0-hour courses, after-school courses, summer courses. It's way easier than it was with the schedule change of having an extra class, and even the new schedule.
That's what I was
But
wondering.
back in the day, the way the arts really survived was the fact that theology, which was one of the required courses, and there were no free periods, theology was Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and we offered all these Tuesday, Thursday courses, and they would go all year for a semester, and that's how a student could take it. Then when out of nowhere, over the summer, they decided to make theology 5 days a week, and there was not much discussion about it outside of the theology department. I don't know if there's that much discussion within the theology department. It just changed, and that really, we did not have those courses, especially for sophomore year and junior year.
Well, I'm aware that long after I was here, but I mean that it went from 3 days for theology to 5, and I figured you have to cut in somewhere.
It was us.
And that's where this whole idea of competition between different departments for time and resources.
We started offering our own 0 hours, and then some really good folks like Al Bodeker and Pat Zarek offered biology and theology in the morning, only because they wanted students to have the opportunity to take the arts. That was a really neat thing they did. And then we offered them as well. I think I did 0 hour about 3 years.
Do you notice much of a change? I know over the 34 years you've been here, there have been different principals and different presidents. Does each one kind of bring his, well, I guess there was only one lady principal, but does each one come in with their own priority or emphasis, and how does that affect?
I will tell you, Bob Bannister came from Ladue High School. He was the second principal that I worked with. And Ladue High School had just a robust art department, and he drove me over there during the school day one time to just look at everything, how they displayed the work, the courses they offered. He sent me on a couple conferences, which had not happened the first 6 or 7 years.
Right.
He was a real supporter of the arts. In fact, one of the first things he did was he just turned around and made me full-time, made Joe Kessner, who'd been here for a long time, he just said, we got to hold on to this guy. He became full-time. He was really good. He was a breath of fresh air. By the time Dr. Schinkenberg came, we were pretty established.
But Bannister was one of the ones who really began to turn things around. That's the kind of thing that we want to kind of track or highlight, is that started out with weak support, so to speak, but then he realized, coming from Ladue, the importance of the arts.
Especially studio arts. Art, theater, and
Oh, yeah.
music was always, and it still is, kind of when people talk about the arts at SLUH, studio arts doesn't always get mentioned. It's always our musicals.
Right.
They're out in the open. They're public, you know.
Yes.
And ours is, you know, in the classroom. But in terms of studio arts, Bob Bannister was really a support.
Talking about studio arts and I mean, painting and sculpting and pottery, to get that, I don't mean that there's a lot of equipment, but financially, did you gradually get support to broaden the scope of what you were teaching or doing or offering?
I would say they financially supported the things we needed, but there was never any, you should have this, or what do you need? I'd go up and say, can we get an etching press? And I'd do the, you know, background and proposals, and I rarely were we were told no. In terms of the facilities, to be honest, no. We really moved up here from really pretty cool big rooms across campus because science needed more space. So they quickly moved us over here, and these were temporary rooms. We were supposed to be here for 5 years, and that was 30 years ago.
Oh my.
There have been no updates. I mean, I will say that. Our rooms, yeah, they're probably, they've not been touched in 30 years, and that's,
wow.
I don't know if there's, you know,
well,
other
there's
than the boiler
some
room.
renovation going on here in the old front of the building, and I know everybody, including your department, has been moved out. Will the Fine Arts Department be moved back into the space you did occupy? Joan, there had been some talk years back with the Go Forth campaign of making more physical changes to the school, and I know when Dave Laughlin was here, president, some years ago, he mentioned the possibility of converting the old auditorium original gymnasium into a World Learning Center, and I guess kind of move what is the library to that facility with a new mezzanine and all. And he mentioned, he even showed us drawings of not only that change, but then moving the fine arts to the present Robinson Library. Are you aware? You're aware?
Oh, we went all the way down to picking out the furniture. We knew the exact.
So you were very much aware of that and planning that effort.
We were,
until the money didn't come.
Until it didn't come. But the fact is, even before the money didn't come, we were the very last thing on a timeline that had no timeline. So we weren't planning on ever moving. And these are perfectly fine. We love it up here. I'm just stating.
No, it's good that you,
you know, probably need new tables, new lighting.
Will any of that come with this current? No, you'll just, I mean, you'll move back in with what you had, probably.
They will, yeah.
I see.
And it's just a heating and cooling thing, yeah.
Well, there may be some future campaign where some of the changes that were talked about are planned. It's all a matter of, I guess, having the adequate funds to make this all go. One of the things I wanted to ask about, what challenges specifically did the COVID challenge in 2020 and 2021, especially for the fine arts? I mean, the school is not shut down, but I know you all struggled to get through that 18-month, 2-year period. How did that affect you and your department?
Well, it was really difficult. I will just say the studio arts. I don't know music and theater. But in the studio arts, you know, our principal, people don't think about this when it's just, we got to act fast. But right after spring break, he gave everybody 2 days to come up, and Ian Gibbons, 2 days to get everything they need, their books, their everything. Well, Sarah Rebels and I, the other art teacher, we were up here past midnight on those days, packing up and trying to, everybody had to come up and get a packet of all their supplies. And that was really hard to get that out. Now, I'm going to tell you something that was very cool, is that this school, you know, this is the sports, the plays, the workload. Art is usually the last thing they're going to do for homework. They don't often come up and work. Most of us have this much time in class with these guys. And I have fond memories of teaching from home during those days, and so did my colleagues, because that was at a time when things were really shut down.
Yes.
No one was going out. No one was doing anything but staying home and working in their garden or whatever.
Yeah.
And the work that I will say I got, and the conversations I would have with students, you know, via, it wasn't Zoom that first semester, but it was emails back and forth and sometimes phone calls. The feedback, the drawings, because when you're stuck at home, it's kind of nice to draw, you know? It's kind of nice. Kids would tell me I worked on, I saved everything, I got everything out of the way so I could work on my artwork all night, you know? And it was real, I guess, therapeutic, but they had time to do it well. And I was going back and forth. I would do drawings and take pictures. I would take their drawing and redo it and kind of show them where I think they should go.
Yeah.
And they would, I saved some of the conversations. They
Wow.
were so wonderful. And
So you did have contact, but it wasn't physical contact, it was over the phone or visually?
Yeah, and it was ongoing conversations about a piece of artwork, where in class, I pretty much have them for this much time with maybe 15, 20 other guys. But back and forth, yeah, I've kept my I kept all my sketchbooks from that time, where I would sketch something, you know, when we went to Zoom, I'm holding it up.
Yeah.
I hate saying fond memories, because so many people were in such, you know, dire straits during those times. And yet, for teaching,
Well, that's very
really
interesting,
nice
because
things.
COVID was a challenge in so many different ways, not just for this school, but for every school and institution.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to hear how you managed to get through that, and successfully with, you know, the contact with the students.
When we came back, it was tough, when we had half kids at home on a screen, and it was as difficult as for any other teacher. You're trying to teach half the class while they're here, and half the class at home. And what I ended up doing, and all my other two colleagues in the department came up independent of me with the same solution, which is everybody have this thing at home, and that's your home project, and everyone at school is working on this project. And then when they'd switch, you know, so they could be doing that while we're working in class. And then at the end, they'd show me what they did, and that worked out really well. We were kind of shooting from the hip, you know.
Joan, when did you initiate the student art shows? I know there have been various shows. I've taken them in, and I'm impressed with the work that the students produced. But you were saying initially there were no shows.
No.
When did that begin, and how did that grow?
When I started here, there was a show they put together in the library the first couple of years, but it was interesting. Our students didn't go to it. It was mostly just seen in the evening by the music students' parents in an intermission. They'd send them up to look. And I had done a similar art show at Prep, because it was a very small school, but we'd have a reception, and I proposed it to John. And I think it was once we got up here and we had kind of a small but legitimate gallery. I'm going to say probably 95. Maybe we started it.
And that became
and it
annual,
was
didn't
really,
it?
Yeah, it was really neat. It was really.
Well, I've taken some of them in, and I know it's impressive. I mean, to see what the students produce, it's and they take great pride in it. When you talk with them, it's just amazing how. And I mean, they actually are proud, understandably, of the work that they produced.
Yeah, it was.
But so it started out in like 1995, about then?
Yeah, it started the second year we were up here. The first year we were up here, the gallery was put together by people who probably never put together a gallery. So, by that I mean, if you look outside the halls, there's these glassed-in bulletin boards.
Yes.
Those were hanging in our gallery, and that's where it was proposed we would put art. And then they had these sort of, if you also look in the gallery, one side there's kind of a step up, maybe it's about this high, and along that wall were these cabinets that we were supposed to put sculptures in, but they were kind of science cabinets. They had little panes of glass, and first thing John Miller and I did was just take the whole thing apart, and we made those. We made the boards that are there. He bought all this fabric, and
you adapted it so that you could
we
use
redid it.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that was kind of cool. And then we had the show. The first year, you know, just stating the facts, it was not a place you could show artwork with. I didn't want to put artwork in there, you know. So and then we got better lighting and a different floor, and it was mostly John Miller because he had a interior design
Your
business.
colleague in the department,
Yes.
yeah.
And he really, he just said, this isn't going to happen. We got to redo this. And it was fun. Students helped us. You know, we were stretching that fabric over all the panels.
Now, some of the students can draw or draw good, and I know pottery and you have different things. Is there any one area that more students tend to not flock to, but I mean, I can't draw, but my brother is a great artist, not great, but I mean, he can draw. I'm just wondering, like with pottery, I see a lot of the works that some of the students have produced. Is that a popular?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it is. I think most people sculpt better than they draw at the beginning.
Yes.
Just turn it, look at it different angles. It's real forgiving stuff. And you know, it's just a big rush when you make something and then it comes out of the kiln and it's just totally transformed. And Sarah's wonderful, and Mary Whalen equally. She was the instructor for 30 some years.
Wow.
Yeah, it is. It's but we still fill the drawing classes, and in fact, those are ceramics is a junior and senior course. But freshmen are doing it now because we started this survey course where they do 6 weeks of printmaking, 6 weeks of ceramics, and 6 weeks of drawing and design. And the purpose of that course was so they know what printmaking is, so they know what ceramics, what you do. They get a feel for all of it. And
now, you just mentioned printmaking. Could you explain that?
Yeah.
I'm not familiar with, I mean, I'm familiar with printing, but I don't know how they, how do you?
In fine arts printmaking, you were taking some sort of what we'll call a matrix or a prototype. You're going to take and build or etch or cut into wood, copper, but you're making something that you will ink up and put through a press.
I see.
They're not one-of-a-kind pieces, but they're original artwork. If you think about how money used to be made with plates, that's a level of, that's printmaking. Lithography, that you see the old newspaper editorial cartoons are kind of rough and charcoal looking. That's lithography. That's drawn onto a limestone block and inked up and run through a press. So we have a big etching press in my
do have
room.
an etching press, wow.
And so they learn about 4 forms of printmaking.
Wow.
Like silk screen. Silk screening a shirt is
I got it now, yeah.
That is called serigraph, and that's a fine art form of printmaking, form of silk screening, yeah.
Well, St. Louis U High is known as academics, and many ones go on. I mean, there are students who must show amazing or certain kinds of skills that you're impressed with. I mean, have you helped, or do they go on from here to college level where they concentrate in the fine arts? Do you have many of those?
Many for school this size, no, but enough. I mean, I have 3 guys. This is really cool because printmaking is such a specific kind of art form. There have been 3 students since I've been here who've gotten their MFA in printmaking.
Really?
Yeah, and that's a really advanced degree. It's beyond a normal master's. It's a 60-hour degree, and it's also studio hours, so you're doing twice as many hours for the 60 hours. And it's a lot of work, and I think there's somewhere as a person has an MFA in ceramics, but we've had a lot of students.
I just wondered because I mean I've read of some of the articles, and the students are amazed sometimes at their own abilities that they didn't know they had, that you help foster and direct, and then they take off. And I just wondered if they're, the school's known, for not just math and science and that, but I mean academic, but with the fine arts program and what has evolved under your leadership, it seems like those students who really excel would need guidance in how to maybe carry on in those fields.
Well, I'm thinking about too when John Miller, who was really huge. John Miller, he's had so much influence over our students.
He was here when you first came?
He was here for probably 9-10 years before me, and he left 10 years ago. And he was a tremendous teacher, and he also pulled students in, and he was a big draw. But when he was leaving, I asked alums, I sent out a thing to all the as many alums as they could give me names for. If anybody wanted to write him a letter, and just letters poured in. And one student who's out in Eric Byers in Kansas City, and he runs his own kind of design firm, he said, can I make him a box to put the letters in? And it was the most extraordinary walnut box.
Wow.
It's stunning. And you know, I just think he was a guy that was always making stuff here.
Yeah.
And when he graduated, there were 10 or 12 guys that were going into the studio arts, and many of them had scholarships. That was a really big year. It was Maddie Kleinberg's year, '98. And when they all stood up at graduation, I remember John Miller saying, I said, wasn't that wonderful? He said, I was crying, because there were just these 10 guys that had scholarships.
Well, I'm glad you shared that, because, I mean, I'm aware of the fine arts program, but I've always wondered about those who excel and the guidance and help that you and John and others
and Mary,
have given, so they can carry on in a field that wasn't even existing when we were here. I mean, I won't go way back, you know. But,
well, a lot of architect students who, you know, drawing. We've had probably more students go into architecture than go into what we'd call the fine arts, you know.
Wow.
But they still need their rendering skills and just their design skills, you know. And again, 2D design was really wonderful under John Miller. We've had a hard time finding a design. It's even what we were looking for my replacement was somebody who really, that was their focus, but it's hard to find.
You just said replacement. Have they hired someone to be on the? I mean, as a faculty, your faculty won't shrink. That they will find somebody to, in effect, take your place after 34 years. Wow.
Yeah. Well, good time.
Somebody
for change.
is going to be hired, though, to begin.
Yeah, he's.
Well, that's good. I mean, it's that the department won't shrink, is what I'm getting at.
No, and you know what? It probably ought to grow, because since they've and they talked about hiring a part-time person, because with this change in the extra graduation requirement, our numbers are really big, and most of us are already, and have been for several years, teaching over a full-time load. Because because it started with the freshmen last year. They were the first class that will have 2 years requirement. Now it's freshmen and sophomores, and with each sort of level coming in, the numbers will go up, you know. But
so you're going to need more support to keep up with the demand. I mean, to keep
that, or they'll funnel them into things that are second choices, like maybe, you know, who knows? A lot of times when a student faces taking a fine arts class, and they're going to go to where they feel like they're more comfortable. Like, I know what drawing is. I don't know what, I don't sing, or I don't, you know, they will, our numbers tend to go up more than the performing arts when you're talking about students who aren't specifically going into music or theater. If they're just floating, they're going to go to drawing, you know. So, I think we all think we're going to need more people in the department. The numbers are going to show.
Well, I hope it continues to get support from the administration, because I know each department has to, not fight for, but I guess fight for adequate resources. I mean, staffing and space and financial support.
I was going to say one thing when you were mentioning something about the department being new. When you think of the school being in this building 100 years, and kind of get a perspective of our department, I think I have worked with every studio arts teacher in the history of the school except for Willie Doyle, and he's actually came into my classes the first couple of years to visit. And so that's how small it is, and one person could have worked with every one of them, you know. This new guy will be the first guy I haven't worked with.
And he started the fine arts, I think, in the early 70s, because I was here in the early 60s, and he was here as an English teacher, but then I know it was after I left, but by the time my brother, who's 11 years younger than I, and graduated in the mid-70s, they had a fine art, and Jim he took off. I mean, he has the artistic ability in the family, which I don't have.
Wow, I think it was the mid-70s I heard, till like 80. Well, when I started in 91, he wasn't here, and John was here John Miller earlier. So it was probably maybe 6, 7 years he did it, I'm guessing.
Well, thank God he got it started, and that others like yourself have followed and built the program, because I think it's a wonderful addition to, well, now it's like you say, it's required, whereas way back it wasn't. I mean, for the fine arts.
When I started here, there was remnants of Willie Doyle's foundry, which was pretty cool. He must have been, I mean, I know he's done all these bronze, smaller pieces too. He must have done those down in the basement.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
You know, he was a good ice skater. He used to go to Steinberg regularly and skate, and he was a good ice skater. I mean, it was just a physical thing that he enjoyed, but he was known, in addition for his artistic ability that you're relating, he could ice skate, not professionally, but I mean, he was good on his on skates. Then.
That's pretty
Talking about physical activity, I know in talking with you, you bike to school. Do you still bike to school?
I have to tell you, I did bike from 2011 till COVID. And then in that, I broke my ankle really badly, and it kept me from biking for. And then, I don't know if you've noticed it, but things got crazy on the streets driving.
Oh, that's what I was wondering. It is crazy. It's dangerous.
And and my family and people that love me have just said, please don't, please don't, please don't.
Well, that's why I brought it up, because I remember the first time we talked, you and I, and you mentioned to me that, and I remember there was one time when I was down here for an archives project, and you were going to take your bike out to U City to get some supplies.
I was. That was faster than driving. I mean, you just go through the park.
Yeah, but I said, can I take you out, because I've got my car here? And that's when you told me that you took your bike to work and back, and I was just, and I remember even then, and now, like you say, the crazies that are on the street.
It's too.
Whether you're walking, riding a bike, or driving, it's. You got to be very, very careful.
It is, and my route was really pretty okay, except for around the Washoe area and Pennsylvania. But it was pretty.
Well, that was admirable that you did it all those years and all kinds of weather conditions.
It was great. And it really was. Just please don't do this.
Wow.
Please, it's going to happen.
Impressive.
So yeah.
Joan, what are your plans now? You're retiring after 34 years, but with all your artistic abilities now, are you going to? I'm sure you're going to continue in some ways, but what plans, may I ask, do you have?
Well, I think all the things I haven't had time for, I want to, you know, when I said I was part-time, when I first started here, I look back on those days, and I fondly also, because out of necessity, partly, I really started making art, and it was the first two kind of sort of solo exhibits I had, making art, selling it, and I just loved it. It was some of my, it kind of was the catalyst behind things I started doing, even with Will's dad, Jim Linares. We worked on a project together, and I have at least 3 projects that I'm really anxious to get going on. Some
and concentrate on and finish.
Yeah, I have always envied when I read, like, especially writers, when they say I got up and I worked for 3 hours writing before breakfast or something. I want to get in a groove of making art, and to where, I mean, you can find an hour or 2 or a weekend here and there, but you don't get into what I'd call kind of a rhythm of making art.
Yes.
You're just whenever. And I guess in 2018, I got a sabbatical to study lithography. And I remember I could not really settle down for a couple months. I couldn't I was making it, but I was always I got this much time. I couldn't just slow down, I guess I'll say. And I look forward to just working at the pace that you can make good art, you know? And I also think at my age, you have to work hard at staying in shape. And staring at screens a lot when you're grading at night, and you just stop doing other things. I move around a lot here, and I do a lot of steps here. But things like, you know, just strength and meditating and really taking care of myself better so that, you know, quality's good. And my sister and I are going to, I'm working right now. This is funny. In 2011, I have a friend who teaches statistics and math at Flow Valley.
Uh-huh.
And she and I started talking about how many coins are on the ground, because people just
leave, yeah.
And she did an experiment, and I started in 2011 picking up every coin I found biking to school. And I was up when I decided I better stop doing this or I'm going to get killed. I had $172. So
In coins.
And there was there's a 20 and a couple ones here.
Wow,
and there.
yeah, but it's mainly coins.
Yes, it's crazy.
Yeah.
And I just got this last night. My panniers came in some bags to put. I spent it on new panniers, and my sister and I are going to try to do the Katy Trail in the fall, the whole length of it. So I always said, I'll use it for something for my bike. So that's what I'm going to do too, is try that. You know?
When I retired from the courts, I was with the federal courts for a number of years. I did the Katy Trail, and it took me 4 days.
That's fantastic.
From St. Charles, to
Sedalia?
I stopped at Sedalia and then took the train back.
That's what we're going to do.
But on the way, I stopped for lunch one day and was visiting 2 older gentlemen, older than me at the time, came in and they were in their thing and they said, "Where are you headed?" I said, "Well, I'm heading to Sedalia." And I'll never forget this gentleman who turns out that was his, retirement hobby, biking. And he says, "Well, son, the river flows down, the water flows down. You'd be smarter to take the train to Sedalia and come." And I said, "Well, the grades aren't steep or anything." But he was just kidding me about that. It basically, goes somewhat along the Missouri.
Wow,
And
what year was that?
I can't remember the little town that we were in. I can't remember it now. But anyway, he was kidding me though, because I was going west. And not uphill, but when you're going along, his point was that the water flows down. And when he said about getting back to St. Louis, I said, "Well, I'm going to get the train," and which I did. But his point was, well, it would have been smarter for you to take the train to Sedalia and then bike back. And he was just kidding me, but he was an experienced biker because he had been all over the country on, long bike. So I hope, you.
Yeah, were you by yourself when you did it?
My daughter was actually,
cool.
She asked if she could go along, so the 2 of us did it together. And we left on a Monday morning and biked Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and came back on the train late Thursday afternoon from Sedalia.
Nice.
And it
That's
was
really neat.
great, and we hit good weather. We didn't have, problems.
Yeah, we're going to wait
till
till late September, early October.
Yes, that's when we went. Early October was beautiful.
Yeah, and it'll take me that long to get to where I feel I can do it.
Well, do you have, as you retire now, basically good memories of your 34 years of school? It's SLUH.
Yeah, the colleagues were wonderful. Just wonderful people. And I really, I was thinking that last night. Sarah and I were up here cleaning our rooms for all this, and I said, it's a strange thing, beginning of the month, I'm working with 1 million kids doing all this, and it just stops like that. So I will miss that interaction with. I like seeing people get pumped about something.
Well, sure.
And I like the interaction with them. So I really love that. Things that were kind of difficult that I won't miss really have to do with just staring at screens and all the, just the technology that puts us sitting down in front of it.
Yes.
But no, I've really loved it. Both schools I worked at, they were very similar, just one was way bigger than the other, but great people to work with that, really influenced me. When I come from a big family.
Do you?
Yeah, and I noticed things that were, that traits I have that are really formed not by my family, but from right out of college being surrounded by really wonderful adults in teaching in schools, like any school, there's good people everywhere. And, but I really, really loved just all the interests and just they're just good people. And when you're 23 and you're surrounded by all that, it just shapes you,
Yes, it does.
So from my interests in music or, I always say at a high school, you've got, it's not like you're in a college department where maybe everybody is, within that discipline. There's all these disciplines, and if you have a question about anything, there's somebody that can, on the faculty
Give you
help
some more information or help you, yeah,
whether it's
understand
gardening or
something.
your
Yeah.
car or history or music,
Right.
and then there's a library in the middle of it. I
Right.
mean, what a great place to go to work, So yeah, I'd have to say the people, the work, but it always comes down to the people,
Well, Joan, I want to thank you for participating
Well, it's
in
my
the
pleasure.
Oral History Project. Thank you for your 34 years of service to St. Lucie High, and really wish you the best in
Well, thank you.
your retirement years. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Very
for asking
appreciated
me.
and admired. Everybody that I talk to speak very highly of Joan Bugnitz, believe me.
that's
Thank you
nice.
so much for participating.
That's really nice of you to say.
Okay.